if you know about RPI, then you know that we're a bunch of nerds that are basically told why not change the world. Your people have the knowledge, and you can't replace those people. If you let those people walk away, anybody in the world nowadays with the knowledge that they have and the use of AI can replace your business model.
This is Greg Troutline with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Berto Ponce, the co-founder and the CEO of A&I Strategic Solutions, for a discussion on his company and its growing business in the port sector. So, Berto, to start us off, can you give us a brief career bio and specifically discuss what led you to co-found A&I Strategic Solutions?
So I've spent over a decade, so over 10 years in IT consulting and maritime, and so along that journey, I was really fortunate to work with some of the most brilliant people I've met in the world. Um, I noticed a recurring problem, which was that these elite experts, these people that really knew, as my old mentor used to say, from soup to nuts, the ones that really understood the machine, they weren't given that level of respect or the platform that their talent commanded. At my alma mater, RPI, which is the school that I come from, they're known as the people that found, right, created email and uh, have a huge history. So if you know about RPI, then you know that we're a bunch of nerds that are basically told why not change the world, right? And so for me, the turning point was 8 years ago. I was working on a project with the Air Education Training Command, and so it's Air Force, right? Randolph Air Force Base. I was working with a guy named Robbie Robinson. Robbie Robinson was a gentleman who had a conference room named after him, and he was still alive, right? So it's a huge deal. So whenever the new two-star general would come in, he would ask, "Hey, how's Robbie doing?" So what Robbie was doing is that Robbie was actually doing the planning of all of the balance of resources for training pilots for NATO and for the US. His system in particular went from general ledgers in the World War II days, right, to mainframe systems to then Lotus 123 to Excel. So Lotus 123 being the predecessor to Excel, right? His biggest fear was people forgetting the history of where the systems came from. And the conversations with him were really impactful towards what I call the founding of A&I, which was we wanted to start to take on some of these tough consulting projects where they had a robust history of using legacy information, legacy systems like COBOL, Cold Fusion, etc. These massive 380 plus system migrations with ATC were complex challenges, and they all had a uniform problem, which was I want to use the new shiny thing, but the biggest blockers were always the same thing. These key operational systems were built in some legacy or proprietary format. No one knew anything about them, and nobody wanted to roll up their sleeves to really understand what the problem was under the hood. How are you going to migrate a system to something that's new and modern when you don't understand where it came from, right? I don't know who quoted it, but to understand where we're going, you have to know where you came from, right? And so that's what led towards just the mission of, the world's toughest problems aren't solved by software alone. They're solved by interoperability and ingenuity. And so I met all these people, kind of reiterating where I started from, and I gathered them and said, hey, we met in the trenches of this Air Force project in defense in the AI world. And we said, hey, let's start to tackle some of these challenges. And we found at least that in the maritime industry or the maritime sector, there was this massive challenge of interoperability that still hasn't really been solved. And so that's where we started from.
So, A&I Strategic Solutions today, can you give me, I like to call it my by the numbers look, but I'm really looking for just numbers that give depth and breadth to your organization and your reach
Yeah.
using the metrics of your choice.
We're a small but mighty team. And so just to put an understanding of who the team is that we've assembled, right? Uh, 2.5 billion active devices. So our CTO, he architected the global quality and testing framework for some of well, the world's most recognized brand and well-known hardware ecosystem. So he actually architected the system that's used to test all of their hardware and software integrations. So just bring that zero failure discipline. Every sensor on a pier, 40 billion plus in managed portfolios. Our executive leadership, we've overseen some of the largest. most complex procurement and operational budgets in the history of the aerospace and defense sector in U.S. history. Um, the FAR standard. So our advisory team actually included a key person who helped rewrite the FAR. So we didn't just learn the rules, right, of federal compliance, but we helped write the book. So that's something that we like to kind of pride ourselves in. uh, 10 plus years of federal interoperability. So personally, I've spent the last decade advising agencies like DOT, IHS, Air Force on how to modernize legacy infrastructure without risk of rip and replace, right? And then the last one, zero rip and replace. That's our core KPI. We specialize in interoperability, meaning we extract new value from your existing multi-million or billion-dollar assets versus asking you to scrap them. And I know that's something that when we talk about greenfield and brownfield in the maritime industry, you have a lot more brownfield than greenfield, right? There's a lot more of that old stuff that people put in place between the 1980s to the early 2000s that people are questioning whether they should replace it with something modern that has a modern HTTP or JSON, API type of format versus trying to figure out if there's a solution that can do it today. And the reality is that there are very few, if not no, other vendors in the space that are trying to do what we're doing.
Can you discuss in the round your experience in working with maritime and port owner operators to implement next gen digital solutions?
We generally view the world as a maturity curve, right? Every world, maritime included, has a maturity curve, levels 1 through 5. Um, you find that generally in level 1 through level 3, which is, you know, level 1 being everything's manual, right? When you're talking about T card usage, some of the old school stuff, right? Paper placement of physical map of the yard and placement of T cards where containers have to be located. Phase 2 being now we have a TOS system in place, right? And we're starting to do things a little bit more automated. Stage 3 being now we're starting to get into some of that remote operator, right? Instead of having somebody physically sitting inside a crane itself. When you talk about those first three, um, people generally think of those as like, oh, there's no real automation, right? Phase 3 is now you have some of the yard operations, like instead of people physically driving trucks, maybe there's a remote operator. But there's physical AI and then there's digital AI, right? We play more on the digital AI side. Basically, what I mean by that is I don't lead with we're trying to automate processes to take jobs away. We lead with interoperability and say, hey, everybody should be able to get their cut of the data without the headache that's needed to extract it from the system. So as an operator, there's systems of checks and balances, right? If I'm going to take a crane and drop some form of a container inside the field, I want to make sure that when the operator is punching in what location they're dropping that container in, there's an automated feed that's verifying specifically what the human is doing. But on the reverse side, the human is also verifying the machine. And so what we try to provide them is that cut of data to make sure that they're also doing double and triple checks to make sure that they get the data that they need exactly when they need it. So dispatcher, gate clerks, crane operators. At the end of the day, we're not here to eliminate the human. We're here to eliminate like I mentioned before, 384 different silos that make the human's job a nightmare.
Again, we talk about digital solutions daily, and I understand that Forge Track is your company's offering to the sector to really effectively bridge those gaps between hardware, software, and AI. What specifically is Forge Track, and how does it leverage AI to help make maritime operations more efficient?
We're really looking to develop, we're calling it the global trade community platform, but think of it as the universal translator and common language for the world's trade. We're not talking about DSA, DCSA 3.0 or anything like that. It's more of what DCSA 3.0 is missing, right? Forge Track, we connect carriers, ports, and government all in one place, sharing the same source of truth, and we make sure that the things that make the world move is moving faster, right? Or the things that the world needs is moving faster and more safely. without paperwork, without guesswork that holds us back. So getting into a bit of the nuts and bolts, we're an on-prem first and cloud hybrid solution, and we focus on opening up ports to the partners. Historically speaking, this has been a challenge for most ports. Um, we can take legacy TOS and other data structures. So when we talk about data in the port world, we talk about ANSI X12, Edifact. So think of EDI 315, 322, 309, right? All this stuff, BAPLY, right? And forgive me for getting too technical, but we translate those messages into human readable formats that partners can then read in for better decision making. So government gets everything they need to make sure that people are paying their taxes and tariffs appropriately. BCOs or beneficial cargo owners, they know where their boxes are when they're cleared and when they can be picked up from the ports to make sure that that long line of trucks that's sitting outside the gate is shorter, right? And trucking partners and freight forwarders know exactly when to pick those up, right? And then also in general, just making sure that a port is maximizing communication, partnership, and potentially allowing them to become a more strategic partner to allow for more throughput. There's a lot of competition, as you know, with port systems, especially ones that are in the Caribbean nowadays, for distribution. And so port can actually monetize this data and can provide partners with transparency and visibility in where their assets are located, just eliminating the potential for fines, which may rub a lot of people the wrong way, but we'll see.
Everybody likes a good case study. It's good to talk about new tech, whatever it may be. It's great to hear how it's helping company XYZ um, perform better, perform more efficiently, more cost effectively, save money, perform more safely.
So there's a number of different projects we worked on in the past. I really like to highlight one we worked on with a major port in the US. They were focused on energy. They had a challenge where they had to track garbage for a zero waste campaign for a major city, and how much garbage was being processed. They were contractually obligated actually to show how much garbage they were processing. One of the issues that they had was they didn't know where the containers were located at any one time. They didn't know what ships they were on. They didn't know how to track the movement from ship to truck to rail and so forth to all their partners. And you might not be surprised, but the biggest challenge was actually getting all of the parties on the phone and getting them to set up a joint data sharing policy. So what does that mean, right? How do we react to X and what format do we need it, meaning the data? How do we test the solutions that they're working and that sort of thing? So what it really came down to was everybody had their own data needs. They all needed in a different format. EDI 315, EDI 322, EDI 309, right? The manifests, what was going to the rail system, what was going to customs and CBP and the Coast Guard, etc. And so we managed to increase throughput by about 15% for this port system just by the ability to create that real-time handshake view of the data, right? We now had all of these EDIs, which think of EDI as just a file being dropped in a folder. It gives a status of this container arrived at this time. This is where it came from. This is where it needs to go, right? And it's just a state point in time. The problem with a lot of these legacy formats is that it's all point in time. When somebody says, oh, this system doesn't have an API, what that really just means is that there is no way to easily share those files in a structured format with the partners. So the second that you can put that into a data stream or in a structured format, and then translate that easily into the format that the partner wants, which is easier said than done, then at that point you've solved the problem of having an API. So when people say that the future of the port systems is switching from EDIs to APIs, literally what they mean is, in my opinion, it should mean that you're translating EDI into a format that a partner can then pull from, and you maybe translate that for them into the language they want. So imagine having a letter in Chinese, right? You have the format, you have the letter, so the partner says you have it, right? But you might not be able to read it. So I need to translate in the Chinese. And then if I want to respond back to the partner, I need to then translate it from Chinese back to English and then from English back to Chinese to send it back to the partner. And that's what we are at the end of the day. and that's what we provided.
But if you had to give a generalization of the ports and the maritime entities that you've been dealing with, and you had to grade their maturity about integration of solutions that do exactly as you just said, where are we today?
Oh man. That's a good question, a painful one. The reality is that most ports in the US have not adopted technology like ours. What they're looking to do, and what I see a lot of the other vendors in the space doing, is that they're pressing, I mean, including even Merit. Merit just released like 480 or $460 million for interoperability and intermodal solutions. And so, what a lot of folks are going to do is they're going to apply for these grants and they're going to go out and they're going to buy new sensors that instead of using EDI, use HTTP, for example, because it's just an easier protocol to be able to try to translate into JSON or XML, which is what CBP and the ACE 2.0 initiative that's going on with CBP right now, it's going to line closer to that. But the reality is that they're going to be overspending when there's already solutions like ours available on the market. The reality is that, especially now with the use of AI, we can get to a point where you could create a solution or a middleware like ours that could translate that in a much easier way. So not to spill the secret sauce, but the reality is that it could be better spent with someone who already solved the problem versus looking to try and upgrade from a hardware perspective. And the majority of ports are outdated. I mean, you have those outliers like San Diego and LA and I think Corpus Christi and there's a few other ports in the states that are definitely way more advanced, but you'll find that the majority of the others are lagging behind.
When you look at AI, which is obviously very topical across any industry, from your experience, what are the biggest misconceptions? And then specifically to maritime and port operations, um, generically, what does it do best, or where are some weaknesses that you see?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, generically speaking, we see some trends in the industry. Number one is that AI is trying to be used as an accelerator, trying to be used as an accelerator, but the majority of organizations aren't putting the infrastructure in place to make sure that they can actually use it. Um, Google's calling it what are they calling it right now? Google and Harvard are basically using some terminology that's effectively like not we say knowledge is infrastructure or a live ontology is the way that Google places it right now. And so what live ontology means is that we need a full understanding of how does your organization operate? What are all the things that every single person does? So in the case of a port, from the very top of the chain, meaning like your VP of operations or your COO, all the way to the bottom level, meaning the longshoremen that are pulling the stuff off the ships, right? We need to have a fully documented understanding of what is it that they do, what's the data that they're dependent on to make decisions, and then also what are all the systems that they're using as well. A full mapping end to end. And based off of that, you need to have connections, live connections, right? Or some form of a chat bot that's consistently updating this live ontology so that the AI can make effective decisions for you, right? Or provide information that's helpful. And then from there, you can figure out what can we automate, what can't we automate, and then also always have human in the loop, right? We don't want the AI to make the decisions. We just need to know who the AI should be going to make the decision because human intuition cannot be replaced. Knowledge at its core is going to be the most valuable thing that any organization can have. And so, what I tell everybody in the AI world is just understand that the second that you trust somebody with the knowledge of how your organization operates, that is what is going to be leveraged in the future. So, guard that as much as you can. And the reality is that your people have the knowledge and you can't replace those people. If you let those people walk away, anybody in the world nowadays with the knowledge that they have and the use of AI can replace your business model.